The film is based on real events. In England in 1944, a full-scale rehearsal of the Allied landing on the presumed coast of Normandy was carried out under the leadership of Dwight D. Eisenhower, but due to poor communication, everything went off plan. Naval Command was supposed to shell the beach an hour before the landing, but some delays occurred, and the clarity of the British and American radio frequencies did not match. So the men ended up directly under artillery fire. 6 weeks later in his home, James Stagg, an Air Force colonel, and Britain's leading military meteorologist, had breakfast with his pregnant wife for the last time before departing for a special military center. After that he got into a car, and during the drive he watched the weather the entire time, making small mental notes to himself. Arriving at the place where the service was being introduced, after which he was met by Andrew Carter, who would be his attached adjutant. They then drove along a dirt road to the estate, passing tents with soldiers preparing for the upcoming military operation. Going inside, Andrew explained that the operations rooms were upstairs, the teletype machines were in the basement. Entering the office, James saw analog maps hanging on the wall, which surprised him greatly. While talking with his subordinates, he found out that they were working with historical data, and that no one was checking current atmospheric changes in the upper layers, so he assigned 2 people to that task. After that the adjutant led him to his office, where at that moment Lieutenant K. Summersby, General Eisenhower's personal secretary and assistant, happened to be. James was not at all pleased that other staff were using his office, so she had to leave quickly, left alone. He wanted to call his pregnant wife who was in the hospital, but the operator refused him. At that same moment Kay came in and announced that General Eisenhower was waiting for him. They walked through the maze-like corridors of the estate, where many people were present, into a large hall where the general was discussing the plan for preparing and landing the troops. During the introductions, Eisenhower explained that D-Day was set for Monday, June 5, at 6:30 in the morning, which would come in 61 hours. The landing would involve 7,000 ships, 150,000 soldiers, and 200,000 sailors, not counting military medics and aviation. Therefore they needed an accurate weather forecast for Monday. James tried to explain that the weather in Eastern Europe could not be predicted more than a day in advance, but the general ordered that he see a forecast by tomorrow morning. Colonel was very embarrassed by such meager circumstances. At that time, in the office where the main research was conducted, Irving P. Crick, the chief American meteorologist, was having fun with his assistants. Seeing Kay, he invited her to dance a little, and this action angered James, who was standing nearby. After a cold introduction, Irving explained that they determined future weather using maps from past years, while James said that climatic conditions were always completely different, so one could not rely on old data. Irving decided to show off by telling how he had predicted the weather in Los Angeles before the filming of Gone with the Wind. When Stagg got tired of listening to this nonsense, he ordered everyone to get to work because the forecast for Monday had to be ready by the next morning. He also explained that he needed weather data from 3,000 kilometers in various directions, including Paris, New York and Newfoundland. Get the data from all the weather balloons, from all the reconnaissance aircraft. Pressure in the upper and middle layers of the atmosphere, and temperature and sea salinity were also important. After this, intense work began across almost the entire northern hemisphere. Weather balloons were launched to check the pressure in the upper layers of the atmosphere, and the density and height of clouds were checked. Data poured in at high speed from Normandy, from southern Greenland, monitoring several approaching storms that had formed in the North Atlantic. Finally, on Friday evening, June 10, a fresh map was ready at that point, and they began discussing their thoughts on it. Irving argued his case by comparing the current situation to similar ones on historical maps. James, however, explained that 2 storms had formed over the Atlantic that could lead to the appearance of a third over Normandy, which would make the troop landing extremely dangerous and impossible. Irving had strong arguments in favor of his past forecasts in Africa, which had come true 100%. But those had been made under almost unchanging conditions. James didn't care about this and ordered the work to continue. The next morning, Bernard Montgomery, the British general commanding the Allied ground forces, showed videos in which they deceived the German forces using inflatable tanks and aircraft. He also showed models of paratrooper dummies that were supposed to explode upon landing, leaving only the parachute. They would drop them 20-30 kilometers inland in France to draw German forces away from the coastline. Continuing the conversation in Eisenhower's office, General Montgomery insisted on speeding up the day of the landing, because every hour of delay gave the enemy time to strengthen its positions. He didn't care about the weather, nor about what would happen to the mobile units. During the day, Montgomery decided to stop by James's office, first to introduce himself, and then he explained that if they did not cross the English Channel on Monday morning, the war could be lost and someone would have to answer for it. Later, Irving came into his office, having decided to go to the briefing to report good weather on the day of the landing. James explained that responsibility for the weather on D-Day lay with him, so he went to the briefing alone, and also reminded him who among them was the senior meteorologist. Irving ran off enraged, loudly cursing his boss. Later, the colonel was escorted under military police guard to a meeting of all the commanders-in-chief of the coalition forces. General Eisenhower began introducing those present. The first was Chief Air Marshal Trafford Leigh-Mallory, Commander-in-Chief of the Allied Expeditionary Air Force. This was General Omar Nelson Bradley, Commander of the U.S. First Army, and Admiral Bertram Ramsey, Commander of the Naval Forces. James, answering Eisenhower's question of why Irving Crick was not at the meeting, said that his forecast would not change no matter what. Colonel Stagg reported that 2 storms unprecedented for this time of year had formed over the Atlantic, so he expected winds of 4, 6, 7 waves up to 4 meters high, sometimes possibly 5 meters, as well as low cloud cover. Bernard Montgomery insisted that June 5 was the only day on which conditions for their paratroopers and landing force could be the best. Unlike in Operation Tiger, according to Bernard, the next day with good conditions would be the 18th. Montgomery and the others were indignant, since it was impossible to keep their plans secret from the enemy for that long. After the meeting, an enraged Eisenhower burst into the meteorologist's office. He ordered everyone to leave and close the door behind them. With it then the general shouted an explanation that Irving Crick had told him about ideal good weather on the 5th, and that he had the right to speak up if it could affect the outcome of the invasion. In the past, Irving's forecasts had saved thousands of lives, so why should he trust James? In his defense, James explained that Crick's luck came from forecasts he had made in stable systems such as North Africa. Then he showed a map on which 2 large storms could be seen moving toward the coast of Normandy. The general clarified that from now on the 2 of them together must approve future forecasts. On Sunday morning, June 4, Eisenhower came to find out what the weather conditions would be tomorrow, but as always the leaders began arguing among themselves. Irving suggested the weather would be good if compared to historical maps, and James called this complete idiocy. The general grew tired of their talking and asked directly whether the weather would be good or bad. At that moment the telephone rang. When James picked up, a woman told him terrible news: German planes had bombed the hospital where his pregnant wife was lying, and they still could not find her. This news caused him to freeze up momentarily. James hung up the phone and explained to the pestering general that the weather would be very, very bad on the morning of the 5th, barely holding back tears as he did so. K. Summersby realized that something very terrible had happened to James, which was why he could not think normally about his work. He went outside to get some air, and various flashbacks of his military past came into his head. Kay came up behind him and called him to come back with her, since they needed him very badly, and on the way she calmed him down a little. After that she went to Eisenhower's tent, where he was looking through terrible photographs. First, Kay tried to soften the general's attitude toward James, because he might break down. And she also asked for the chance to go to the hospital to find out about the condition of his pregnant wife. The general flatly refused her this request, not understanding what this might lead to. On Sunday, June 4 at 4:00 in the morning, the last meeting of the commanders-in-chief began, and James, devastated by grief, refused to bring any maps with him, knowing that he could tell them everything even without them. The generals began arguing among themselves about under what conditions they could land and also provide air support, but Montgomery simply could not calm down. After brief deliberation, Dwight D. Eisenhower postponed the day of the Allied landing in Normandy. After that, all units were ordered to stay in their positions and take no action. On Sunday, June 4 at 8:00 in the morning, James opened the window but saw no signs of worsening weather there. He decided to go to the morning prayer service at a nearby church, where at that time all the main characters of our film were present. Being in a bad state, James did not stay, but went to a large tree to rest a little from all the commotion. Suddenly a small wind began to rise and dark clouds appeared in the sky, as if a strong thunderstorm were approaching. The general, hearing the rumble of thunder, decided to go outside and finally confirm the complete truth that James had been trying to prove the whole time about the approaching storm. Thanks to this they managed to save thousands of soldiers' lives. Only Crick was completely crushed by his mistaken assessment of the upcoming weather. On Sunday, June 4, at 4:00 in the afternoon, there was a huge storm at sea, with waves exceeding 3 meters in height, and very strong gusty winds. At that time, while in the office, one of the staff members told James that the cold front was beginning to retreat. He ordered all readings within an 800 kilometers radius of Cape Laxod to be transmitted, and all the data to be checked 3 times. 10 minutes later, James went to Irving's office for help decoding some data that had come from Ireland. At first, Irving refused, but then he agreed to double-check this strange information after all. Throughout the rest of the day, they continued to collect data, not believing their own eyes that such a strange meteorological phenomenon could occur at this time of year. They called it a gap between storms, in which almost ideal climatic conditions arrived. And that day became the day of the landing. On Monday, June 5, at 3:54 in the morning, General Eisenhower came to the office at James's request, who told him that the large storm was pulling the 2 smaller ones away from itself, creating a gap on Tuesday, June 6, for landing troops on the coast of Normandy. This meant sending soldiers right into the very heart of the storm, because the enemy would not expect such a gap between storms at all. The general asked again whether he was sure. James answered that the weather would not be ideal but would be acceptable, and the official position was to go ahead. Eisenhower, with some doubts but nonetheless agreed finally. Tuesday, June 6 arrived, that very long-suffering D-Day, when the Allied forces, after preparation, set out to cross the English Channel to land on the coast of France. At a special command post, generals and representatives of the military meteorological service gathered, who would watch the landing of the troops, almost live in 60 seconds after the radio silence that occurred during the crossing of the sea. The operators tried to contact the regimental army commands. Meanwhile, the brave soldiers tried to take cover on the open beach from the machine guns firing at them, falling dead by the dozens as a result. One by one the regiments began to make contact, explaining that they had walked into an ambush on the beach and had suffered losses, and the Air Force reported that the clouds were too low for them to help with fire support, as expected. The weather decided otherwise, and that gap between the storms had not yet appeared, so the landing craft began to drift off course. But the boats that had managed to dock at the shore were not lucky, because the soldiers were very easily shot down by the machine gun crews. Reports began coming in that the first unit was lost, the second unit was lost, the fifth unit was lost, and the Air Force, because of the clouds, could not help bomb the beach's defensive structure. Finally, a miracle happened. The clouds began to rise, giving the bomber pilots excellent visibility. Half an hour later, General Montgomery received important information, after which he immediately told the others that the Allied forces had managed to secure a foothold on all the beaches at once. On one hand, this was a joyful event that changed the course of the war, and on the other hand, there were huge irreplaceable losses of brave men. When the work was finally finished, James said goodbye to Bernard and then, standing by the car, said a big thank you to Kay Summersby. Half an hour later he reached St. Mary's Hospital, which had been bombed. Entering the ward where the women after childbirth were located, James saw his wife, healthy and unharmed. In shock from joy and with tears in his eyes, he hugged her tightly, and beside her in the crib lay his newborn son.